I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Who is the lucky brunette?
Last name Beeswax, first name Nunia.
Oh, my third wife is biracial.
It's simple, really. First we...
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss.
It's the Al Travis Show. We're lucky to have our next guest in. He is the GOP floor leader. He's Representative Harry Niska. We have not had him on the program before. Well, you got elected in 2022. Thanks for being here, by the way, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good morning.
You've moved up the ranks pretty quick. GOP floor leader. You got elected in 2022. So you didn't have time to be on the cable show. That's why I would have thought we would have had you. So thank you for coming on the show and being here. Talk a little bit about you. Just find out who you are. You are an attorney, correct? University of Minnesota? There we there?
Yeah, I went to the University of Minnesota Law School. Yeah.
All right. So fair enough. And you, I don't know where 31 is. Where roughly is 31?
Yeah, so I represent the community I grew up in, actually, part of Andover and the city of Ramsey up here in Anoka County.
Okay. And married kids? Give us a little background.
Yeah, married. We have 3 kids. One's a sophomore in college, one is a senior in high school, and an 8th grader, a girl, and then 2 boys.
Okay, fantastic. You're an attorney. You got your law. Are you a practicing attorney that takes off for the session? What do you do currently for work?
Yeah, most of my background has been in litigation, civil litigation. I've also done a lot of business advising, been in-house for some companies, clerked for 2 different judges on the 8th Circuit. So I've had quite a number of different types of experiences and interests in the law, but mostly in the civil litigation and business advising space.
So you get in 2022, we're getting done with COVID. Things have gone a little crazy. The Democrats have taken charge of all 3 seats. How have you enjoyed your stay so far?
Well, the first 2 years obviously were very challenging. Only being able to tell Democrats this thing is going to get either challenged in court or struck down, or it's going to be a big failure. And we turned an $18 billion surplus, or the Democrat trifecta did. It turned an $18 billion surplus into a $6 billion deficit. Increased mandates, increased all the regulations in our state, pushed the most extreme, crazy social policy, and it continued to just flush our tax dollars down the toilet for all these billions of dollars in fraud that we're continuing to learn about over and over again. So that was very frustrating. And then obviously this year being in a tie, it's been just one crazy, turn of events after the other, from litigation to a 1-vote advantage to Democrats not showing up for work, and then finally having to work through a bipartisan budget, and then all of the tragic events that have happened this is
absolutely the craziest year ever in Minnesota politics. I'll put it up against anything. This has been nuts. One of the things we do here, and because I detest fraud so much, we talk about it all the time. And one of my main things is, how in the world does this happen? This seems to be someone must want it to happen if it's going to happen. Well, I don't know if you caught the Star Trib today. Jim Nobles, he was the old legislative auditor, writes a letter, a commentary, and he doesn't do a lot of names, maybe for good reason, maybe bad reason. But what he says should drive every Minnesotan off a cliff in rage. Mm-hmm. He uses an example. The Office of Legislative Auditor issued a report on child care fraud. Remember that? Way back when? The then chair of the House Human Services Committee said, don't worry, there's always going to be fraud. And she refused to allow the OLA to present the report to the committee.
Right.
In addition, Chief House supporter, publicly funded children's subsidies, criticized the OLA report for referencing prosecutions that had proven fraud in the child care case, saying that was unnecessarily harmful for the OLA to point out fraud. Are you allowed? I mean, how do I put it? I'm under the impression we, the taxpayers, pay for the office, the OLA. to be this independent, right? We pay them. I'm under the impression senators or House people then say, will you please take a look at this? And I'm going to use autism as an example. Started as $3 million project, and in 4 years, it's 200. Let's take a look at that. And so the OLA would go take a look at it. Are you telling me we paid them to be there, tell them what to do, and when they come back with the report, seriously, a chair of the committee can say, we're not going to look at it? You're not going to hear it? That is seemingly impossible to me.
Yeah, well, a chair of a committee can decide what topics are discussed in their meetings and what bills are heard in those meetings. I think it's pretty easy to deduce who the two individuals are that Mr. Noble is talking about. He's talking about two very influential current Democrat legislators, current Democrat House members, who pushed back on Mr. Noble and on that office. It's a nonpartisan office. It's an office that does it reports on issues based on a process that we go through to give them suggestions on reports that we should go through. And they have raised a lot of red flags. They've raised red flags to the Walz administration that the Walz administration has ignored, and that Democrat legislators in particular have said things like what Mr. Noble relays in that they didn't want to hear the issues that he's raising, whether that's incompetence, whether that's some element of wanting that money to continue to flow, what all the motivations of those people are that have done it really, isn't as important as the fact that we need to change course from and get rid of, frankly, the folks who haven't been doing enough to deal with the fraud, starting with the governor. I mean, this all starts at the very top, the culture that's established in his administration that has allowed this to happen, and with Democrat legislators especially wanting to continue to cover it up.
Well, sir, and are people going to buy it? You must have saw him in the Hauser interview, right? Where he said they asked if they're going to be more fraud, and he said, more than likely, yeah, because these guys are really good at it. But he was heartfelt sorry because this hurts him deeply because these are his babies. He has seemed almost shocked by it. But here's the second bit I want to ask you about. The speaker at the time said, as a former prosecutor, she knew the fraud from OLA was addressing was real and needed to be investigated. She did, however, acknowledge House committee chairs had been instructed to not give OLA reports about fraud any public hearings. If the speaker's talking like that, who is she talking about? Who other than her, the governor? Who instructed these committee chairs that they were not to give these reports out? Why are there no names here? I want some names. You say it'd be easy to figure out. Yeah, I can go back and see who the committee chairs are. But who is that person talking about right there? Who would talk to the OLA chairs, or the chairs themselves, and say, you're not doing this?
I would love to know the answer to that, too. It seems like that's the speaker implying someone other than the speaker, who would be the person who should be instructing, giving chairs direction on what they are or are not to get hearings on. What we do know from, when you talk to the feds and those who did do something about this, is that there were a lot of, especially Democrat-aligned interest groups, powerful people within their orbit who would say things like, if you investigate certain groups, that would be evidence that you're being racist, and things like that. So I'm not sure exactly whether that's a reference to someone in the administration, whether that's someone who was pushing that line that was being the big pushback when we're talking about feeding our future and a lot of these other fraud scandals that you can't investigate, you can't push back on certain nonprofits or things like that because that would be racist, or that would be not in alignment with other Democrat priority or friends of Democrat priority groups.
And what we're talking about is here. It's in this. Like-minded folks said they were upset with the OLA. She said, but acknowledging that some members of our caucus were very upset. OLA reports were subjecting Human Services Program to too much criticism, particularly programs administered by Somali community organizations. They listed the name. I don't care if you're Somali, don't care if you're Catholic, don't care if you're the Lutheran brother. I don't care. But when you say we don't want to go after them because too much of the fraud was in one community, it makes us look bad, that's got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. If you know it's clustered within a bunch, and you'll see some folks in all of these names cross over, why would you not go for that? You rip the weed out by the root, right? I mean, you don't just go to the next yard and say, you know what I'm saying? That seems to me like they're running scared of being called prejudiced, and it doesn't matter what you insert that group name as. I don't care. It was fraud.
Well, the governor referred to this, and as he's trying to preempt or warn people that more bad news is going to come out about him, he called it organized crime, and I think that's right. Frankly, finally, he's calling it what it is, and he's calling it how it should have been dealt with in the past. And so, who exactly was telling chairs that they shouldn't be investigating, whether that's people working for the governor, whether that's people working for the different nonprofit groups. I mean, they're either accomplices or patsies, right, of organized crime, and we need to deal with it accordingly. And we should consider those folks, frankly, and their continued operation in positions of accountability and responsibility accordingly.
Well, let me ask you this. Where is Keith Ellison's responsibilities on this? If the governor's saying it's organized crime that's doing this, now this isn't, should some OLA guy say something, this would be Keith Ellison coming in, right? This is organized crime. He's the attorney general. Where has he been, and why does the U.S. attorney general got to come in and find this? Evidently, we knew this shenanigans was going on.
Yeah, we've known that Keith Ellison wasn't taking this seriously for years, and we got a little glimpse of that with that recording that came out earlier this year, where it was clear he was seeing the fraudsters, the people perpetrating this, more as political allies, as people that he was trying to help solve their problems than as people that he was serious about cracking down and ridding out our fraud. The Attorney General's office should have been all over this. It shouldn't have required federal law enforcement. And frankly, as a state, we need to make sure that we step up our criminal penalties. Some of these things do have to end up getting sent up to the feds because of the lack of adequate criminal penalties under state law for some of this. So there's a big problem. Starting with the governor, starting with the attorney general, starting with Democrats in the legislature. They have not taken this seriously enough. And whenever anything has come up, there's been a lot of pushback politically within on their side that has caused them to pull back. And that's what I think Jim Noble is talking about.
How much more of this can we expect, sir? This seems like almost that Chinese water torture. It's just daily, being in the head one more time. I'm getting tired. This is ridiculous to me, what we read today. And the governor saying you can expect more. How much more? How many more organizations? How many more of our committees have failed us? What's the number? Are we about done?
Don't think we're anywhere close to done, especially if you know that the governor has finally been told that he better start preempting the further fraud that's going to come out as he's trying to run for a third term. Minnesotans I think, are finally going to get sick and tired and fed up with the governor who tries to blame everybody else for the failures on his watch. But yeah, he knows much more is coming out. I think he's right about that for one thing.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about that as the weeks go on. This isn't going anywhere, and it won't in the next. I presume this will be the number one issue, sir, in the state for the 2026 election. Even though that's a year away. Can this get swept under the rug in a year? We can't fix it that quick, can we?
Well, it'll be one of the top issues on the ballot in 2026. I know we were talking earlier. I think whether girls' sports are going to exist in Minnesota is going to be a pretty big issue on the ballot in 2026 as well.
You've done radio before, because that's what we're going to talk about right after this on the Al Travis Show. Thanks for the segue. We got 3 minutes, sir, but you're still on camera, just so you know.
Good, thanks.
Think about it. A famous politician once said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts." But in a world full of AI and fake news, where can Minnesotans find the facts? Center of the American Experiment is Minnesota's go-to source for fact-based analysis and common sense solutions for taxes, energy, public safety, and our kids' education. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Tired of one-sided media and divisive noise drowning out your conservative values? Take back the conversation with Braver Angels. Join a grassroots movement to restore civility and find common ground without compromising your principles. As a conservative, your voice matters. Share your perspective on issues like immigration and public health in red-blue workshops and help rebuild trust in our great nation. Be a leader in depolarizing America. Sign up for free at mn.braverangels.org. Braver Angels, where conservatives, liberals, and independents unite for a stronger republic.
You don't need to ask him his opinion more than once. Al Travis on the Al Travis Show.
What Representative Niska, thank you again for being on the program, was chatting about before we got into the break was that the Minnesota Supreme Court yesterday sent back a case to the lower courts asking them to determine whether USA Powerlifting has a legitimate business purpose for excluding this gentleman in powerlifting in the ladies' ranks. They said it facially is discriminatory. You're a lawyer, sir. I'm going to come at you like this. I'm USA Powerlifting. Do I have a legitimate business purpose for separating them? Of course I do. If I didn't separate the men from the women and the women never won a powerlifting competition, I would lose half my business, the women that want to powerlift and get into sport. It makes perfect sense to me that there's a reason we have it. I know you guys are, in 2023, we changed just the gender identity instead of sexual orientation or whatever. You changed the wording around. Does that have to get fixed in this next legislative session, or do you get rid of girls' sports completely and just have sports?
Yeah, we do have to fix that law, and we had anticipated that the Minnesota Supreme Court was going to rule that way because we knew this lawsuit was pending. We knew that the Walz administration, represented by the Keith Ellison's Attorney General's office, was arguing in front of the Minnesota Supreme Court that we essentially should have that it should be considered illegal discrimination in Minnesota to say women's sports are able to be defined by biological sex. And the Minnesota Supreme Court decision actually analyzed two different types of discrimination claims. One was a business discrimination claim. There's a ban on business discrimination in Minnesota law. There's also a ban on public accommodation administration. And they said, as to the business discrimination claim, there's the defense that you referenced about a legitimate business purpose. And of course, you're right. Of course, there's a legitimate business purpose. But the Minnesota Supreme Court went actually even worse than that on the public accommodation claim. And they said, on that claim, there is no defense for it being a legitimate business purpose. And they said that the powerlifters lose on that. The Powerlifting Association loses on that case. So the Minnesota Supreme Court unanimously held, as urged by the Walz administration yesterday, that a biological male, by biological sex, male powerlifter must be allowed to participate in a women's powerlifting competition, and that it is illegal discrimination under Minnesota law to say for that sports organization as a public accommodation to say, no, our women's event, our women's division is defined by biological sex. That is extremely concerning. It is, and it's the result, frankly, that every Democrat has wanted. We tried to bring forward bills when we had a 67-66 advantage. We tried to bring forward bills on this. We have two bills that are currently laid on the table when we come back in February, that if one Democrat wants to help us in the House, we can move those bills forward and we can fix this problem and allow sports, girls and women's sports to be defined, those divisions to be defined by biological sex. But the Walz administration, Keith Ellison's office, and Democrats in the legislature unanimously oppose that. That's why I said before the break, I think women's and girls' sports is going to be on the ballot in 2026. The only way we're going to continue to have girls and women's sports legal under Minnesota law is to fire Keith Ellison, fire Tim Walz, and fire the enough DFL legislators to be able to pass a fix to that in Minnesota law.
I'm going to run out of time. I'll throw this out there. It'd be like boxing. If you're just the heavyweight champ, but you know what? You just don't like how hard you're being beat up. You say, I just feel like I'm a featherweight, and I'm going to go punch down. I'm going to go down that way, and they can't stop me because it'll hurt my feelings. Something is wrong with this. It's going to decimate sports. I got to fly. I'm out of time. Representative Niska, thanks for coming on. You can come on anytime. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Harry Niska on the Al Travis Show.